So my name is Andy Acker, and I live here at Jikoji Zen Retreat Center, and we are in the Santa Cruz Mountains, just between Santa Cruz and Silicon Valley. I've been here for about 16 months this time. I lived here previously for a couple of months, like on a retreat in the wintertime, like in the late 2000s. Yeah.
Are you a monk or a resident yogi, or what's your title?
What's the coolest sounding title that we can think of? Because that's what I'll go with. Let's see. I'm actually ordained as a lay monk in the Zen tradition, which means that I've received jukai, or precepts, and just observed, the bodhisattva, the vows of a bodhisattva, and not to do harm and those kinds of things. So in the Zen tradition, it's a little bit, the lines are blurred a bit, it seems, unless it's a full-on monastery or you're at Tassajara or something like that, and you're functioning as a monastic. Most practitioners are lay practitioners, so they may be wearing robes, or you may have taken monk vows, or you may function as a full-on monastic at times. But a lot of people, they live normal lives, and they do this too. Right now, it seems in the Zen tradition, and that's more how it is here, and that's been my approach. So I am a priest in training as well. I'm preparing for priest ordination in this tradition.
Is it like higher ordination?
What was that?
Like next level?
Yeah, I guess, or just like deeper commitment, or, you just need more help.
Okay.
So you get another robe, and, you take the same vows again, and, that kind of.
Well, first, do you consider this place to be a monastery? Or it's a meditation center?
I wouldn't say it's a monastery. We're not functioning like that. I'd say it's a residential Zen retreat center. We're a little bit out of the way, and we do have retreats on a regular basis. Ones that we offer here, and then also other groups that come up and rent our zendos and our dorm rooms and things like that, and hold retreats. But day to day, we're more of a meditation center where people actually live as well. So those of us who live here, we help groundskeep, we help run the weekly programs, and we're here for daily meditation. If you're on site, you're basically expected to be here at 6 a.m. in the morning. There's a 5:30 wake-up bell in the Zen. We always start really early. And then, the han, or that wood clacker that we hit outside, we start hitting about 15 minutes before. And then the 3 bells to start meditation will start just at 6. We'll do a 40-minute sit, maybe about a 5-10 minute service. We're just chanting sutras and doing a few bows. And then we start our day. And a lot of times we start with breakfast. We have the option of having it together. Jikoji kind of hosts the breakfast. But then we're on our own. Like I told you earlier, several of us work. I'm also finishing a graduate degree myself, so there's students, there's people who work, there's a couple people who are retired or in transition and between jobs. I've noticed that community centers or retreat centers like this tend to kind of attract people who are either in transition or are single, or have some kind of situation where they have a navigable schedule with the commitments of being here, but also meeting some other commitments in their life too. But we've had people who are who are also parents. They may not have their child at all times, but people from all walks of life. So I wouldn't say it's a monastery. A monastery is a lot more structured, and we don't quite have that kind of daily structure. It's really more self-directed. And then at 8 p.m. we have an open sit. It's more optional during the week, and then during the weekend we have a Saturday off, and then our Sunday program. We're all here, and we kind of open our doors to the wider community.
Okay.
Yeah.
How do you justify a lifestyle of a retreatant when there's a much bigger community that toil, grit and grind every day?
Right, and I'm not doing that daily grind.
Yeah. So
basically, so how do I negotiate that? How do I work with it? How do I make it work in my life?
How do you make it work in your mind?
Oh, in my mind,
How
yeah.
does it how does
Right.
it sit? How do you explain
Right.
to yourself that this is
Yeah.
a good way to live?
Mm-hmm.
Just how do you explain to yourself, this is the right way? Maybe this is.
Well, the thing is, if you're living a contemplative lifestyle in modern day America, you're going against the stream, and I'm not. There really isn't. We were talking earlier about how there's not really a good kind of popular and general appreciation for what people do, and why one would take up a contemplative practice. I think there's a growing appreciation for it, the mindfulness movement and so on. Because we're really conditioned to finish high school, go to college, get a job, get married. They talked about all this stuff in the movie Fight Club, if you remember. It's like, Dad, what do I do now? I don't know. Get married. Get a job. And so you're kind of like just going through the motions. And when I was younger, I always had a spiritual calling that I would call a spiritual calling. Like when I was younger, and I felt that I would be a priest or a monk at some point. I didn't know what that would look like, so I was raised Catholic, and it looks quite different in that tradition than what I'm doing now. But I was also into a lot of different philosophies, different ways of thinking, and it all just kind of broke loose and came to a head when I went to college. And I was exposed to a lot more different thought and Eastern thought and different kind of philosophies and the arts and humanities, and just in a big way. I started meeting all kinds of people and all these different ways to live, alternative ways of living, the counterculture, all those kinds of things. So if you're doing Buddhism like in a serious way today in modern culture, it's a big counterculture. And so for me, I just feel like I'm a part of that tradition of people who went against the grain. And I always felt I was in like a heavy metal band and stuff, in a punk band when I was younger, and it was just like, this is kind of part of that same attitude. Just like, oh yeah, all that conformity, all living in the same houses, driving your cars in rush hour traffic every day. Great, go ahead. I'm gonna do this. So I went to a different college that my parents didn't expect me to go to. Parents didn't expect me to go to college. Neither one of them finished college. But I knew what I wanted to do. I checked it out. And they encouraged me to do what I felt like I needed to do in my life. And they were very loving and supportive. They didn't always understand, because they were in the tradition that they were raised in, nor did my grandparents or my godfather, that kind of stuff. But I worked full time for years, from when I was like 16 to when I was 24. And then I went off to college in Colorado. And I was either going to be a monk or I was going to finish college. I chose to go to a Buddhist university, Naropa University in Colorado, in Boulder, Colorado. Never regretted it. Made some of the best friends of my life, other practitioners, other people who were living just a little bit differently. And I've just always attracted friends that they didn't necessarily fit the mold quite. They were either eccentric or unique, or, they valued things that a lot of people just don't seem to really care about or talk about. Whether it's the arts or Eastern spirituality or spirituality in general, or contemplative path, regardless of what tradition they're in. I have an uncle who's still Catholic, but he really likes the contemplative practices in Catholicism. So we really we connect on that, and that's very valuable to me. I have an aunt who's a Unitarian minister, so she's doing alternative spirituality at the ministerial level, and she's worked in alternative education, and all that kind of stuff. So I don't know. I see it as part of that. And I work more on a part-time basis, and I'm finishing a grad program, like I said. So I just see myself as I'm creating my life, and I'm going to be doing it differently. And sometimes I feel like I need to go play baseball and eat hamburgers, which is great, and I love doing those things. But not every day, I don't need to be bombarded by media and work full-time. And feel like I have to just get ahead and climb the financial ladder as much. I may not be as ambitious in that regard, because I'm so hungry on the spiritual level. I feel like being being at peace with myself and really taking a good look at what's here has always taken priority for me in my adult life.
What do you think you are bringing back to the community as a contemplative?
It's funny, I don't walk around usually as like I'm a contemplative, you know. But the things that I think I bring back the things that I value, and the life that I've led so far, and presence, hopefully, kindness, being with people rather than speaking at them, and coming from a detached ideology, and being in the moment, working in the moment, and respecting people's kind of basic dignity as human beings. Hopefully that's what I'm bringing. That's what I hope to bring, regardless of what I'm doing. Like I study acupuncture and Chinese medicine. When I work in that, I receive people as if they were royalty, you know, like, because I think that we all have this kind of seat of basic dignity, and I want to touch that, and I want to work with them, and I feel like people respond when they feel very respected on that level. And I work as a DJ on weekends right now too, to kind of make this whole thing work, which is nice, you know, working in events, and I kind of get to express a different part of my personality than, you know, like it's not like I have to be like I'm at a contemplative center like all the time, but it's it is a little bit more where you're mindful of your interactions with others and the space, and kind of taking care of other people's contemplative experiences if they come here and they sit and they're on retreat or something too. So it's kind of good to cut loose every now and then too. But even in those spaces, you know, how am I receiving people there? How am I treating them? You know, and am I using the opportunity to look at my mind and my life and my neuroses too, and still kind of like, oh well, how can I be a little gentler with somebody? You know, like, where could I have met someone more fully, you know, as who they are, and rather than trying to really change them, and just kind of let the situation kind of have the natural intelligence of the situation unfold.
So some questions that I've been asked to ask.
Oh, neat. Yeah, you got these on Facebook?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And some of you already answered.
I tend to just go on when people ask me questions.
Is there a way to bring the benefits of monastic life into an urban lifestyle for spiritual and personal growth? What are your recommendations? So first of all, do you think it's possible?
Do I think it's possible? Well, I think there are people doing it. You know, I haven't spent a lot of time at San Francisco Zen Center, but that's an urban environment where they're doing contemplative practice. It's not a monastery, it's a city center. But I think there's a difference between city centers and like monasteries that are a bit more removed. But you can definitely take meditative life in urban environments. I've lived in larger cities. Like I spent some time in San Francisco. I tend to gravitate towards smaller college towns because it's more my pace. You know, like Boulder, Santa Cruz, you know. But I stayed in East Bay for a while. Minneapolis, I've lived in St. Paul as well. Those are kind of medium-sized American cities. And sat at some urban centers there too, Zen centers and Shambhala centers and things like that, and or Tibetan Buddhist centers. And I see people going to those centers and participating in meditation programs and doing a weekend. They might go back home and sleep, but they do a weekend. And it affects them. They don't look quite the same by the end of the weekend when they came in and they had all their, like, you know, their tensions and their habits and, you know, like their strategies about life and, you know, their coping mechanisms and all that kind of stuff, and they let go of it for a weekend and they might start a daily practice. So I'd say really it's not necessarily where you are, it's how you are, I think, is really the big difference. And if you're given the tool, say if you go spend time at a retreat center in a quieter location, even though you live in an urban environment. Since I've been an urbanite most of my life, you know, but I've been someone who's really prioritized contemplative practice. it's kind of new that I live in a rural area. I kind of had to get used to it. And it's like, wow, it's really dark out here. And like there are things that could eat me out in the forest, you know. I had to get used to that. So being an urbanite, I think you can take these things back. And if you value it, you can find silence even though you live in an apartment that's on the 3rd or 4th floor and you can hear traffic. You can be with that. You can create a space where you live. If you have 4 kids, you know, perhaps you can still find time. I think it's just really, what do you value? And do you value that practice? Well, the one idea that was passed on to me at some point that I tried when I was working and living in Minneapolis was work retreats. And basically, if you can set it up that way, and of course, you know, I was single and I was renting a room from a yoga teacher, so it made it a little easier. You know, we both had some similar lifestyle choices in that regard. But, or if you have your own apartment, you can manage this. So you set aside the time that week to sit when you're not at work. And maybe you're not sitting all day or you're not doing meditative practices all day. You know, so I do some yoga and I would do sitting meditation and I do the Buddhist meditation. And I do like 3.5 hours, maybe 4 hours of that, like 2 hours in the morning. And then like, you know, 2 or 3 hours when I got back home and eat a nice meal and go to bed at a decent time, maybe earlier than I usually do, you know, not necessarily watching movies or hanging out with friends. And do that for, you know, like a week. And so doing that work retreat every once in a while would refresh me. Another thing that really helped that I learned from Bernie Glassman, who does, he works with homeless people, and he's an American Zen teacher and author too, and a great speaker if you ever have a chance to see him speak. He recommended taking a day a month to really renew your practice. And that helped me, especially when I worked full time and I had a lot of responsibilities on that level of my life. You know, I could still take care of my finances. I could still work. I could still be a brother and a son and a boyfriend and everything else that I was to people. And I was even like had a couple music projects and other things going too. But I would still take a day a month. That was just my day. And I would make sure I got enough sleep. I'd wake up. And I'd do a lot of sitting that day and reflect on where I am. Maybe do some reading, you know, read some Dharma books or something, some journaling. And that was very productive. And so that was another great way to do that. Quarterly is also another way to do it. But I just think finding structure and finding oftentimes a certain time of day to approach your practice also helps too. Or in a certain place where you live to return to. That's where you sit. That's where you do your practice. Those things help. It seems that working with that kind of form really does help. And then also on top of that, deciding how long you're going to meditate, like 20 minutes. And set the alarm, or there's apps now where you can, you know, it's like the 20-minute sit app or whatever, and the bell rings. Or keep track of it yourself. That kind of helps you be mindful too of time while you're sitting. That's helped me a lot, but really the things that have been the biggest resources for me are making friends that do this kind of thing too. Has been very valuable, especially in urban settings. People that I can be at home with in my spiritual practice and talk to about it, and that's where the centers come in, where there's a study group, like the Shambhala Center in Minneapolis had a Wednesday night study group. That just like, I liked the people, I liked the guy who was leading it, and we sat for an hour and then studied one of Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche's books for an hour. That was great. That helped anchor me. And when I could, I'd come to their Sunday program. And I was going to the Zen Center at the time too, so I do retreats when I could and take the time off of work. It's kind of funny being a contemplative and having a job today's day and age too, because other people go on vacation and they go to like, oh, we went to Belize and it was amazing, or wherever they went, you know, the Caribbean, or we went down to Florida. It's like, yeah, I went to the center and stared at a wall for 5 days, you know. So, you know, it's a little bit different. Still go on vacation every now and then, just have fun, but the priority is different. And that's what I meant. Like if you value it and you prioritize it, It's like a friend of mine who's done a lot of Vipassana retreats. I was asking him about something once, and he said he was also a very accomplished, musician and businessman too in his own right. And he said to me one day, he said, "I've just noticed that whatever you place your attention on tends to grow. So I just think if you give it your attention, it grows. It's like nourishing a plant." And there's such a joy to living your life and letting yourself just soak in your practice to a certain time each day, a certain amount of time each day, and giving yourself to it, and then stepping into your life and just seeing what happens.
Some people would say that it's very selfish to go and remove yourself from society in a way.
Mm-hmm.
What would be your answer to that?
I don't feel removed from society. I feel like I live in a rural environment, and I may do some of these things day to day. I live only 20 minutes from Saratoga and 45 minutes from Santa Cruz, and 30 minutes from downtown Los Gatos. It's not too bad. I go to the library and hang out, and I work. I have a girlfriend too down in Santa Cruz, and it's I'm around.
Okay.
I may not be around as much as when I'm a townie, like living in the town or in the city, but sometimes I may be up here for a week at a time, and it's done on purpose. I minimize some of my commitments. I still feel like I pay attention to my relationships, and I vote, I do all that kind of stuff. But to answer your question, I think that most people don't spend enough time with themselves, just alone or in silence. They don't really take a look at what's happening right here. We just take it for granted. Oh, well, I'm me. What's that? Have you looked at that recently? Not doing anything else, with no other commercial agendas like we were talking about. No other agendas kind of attached to it. Not trying to really aggressively achieve something, but what about just being? There are plenty of people just being. It reminds me of have you seen the movie Dr. Zhivago or read the book?
I've heard of it.
Yeah. Well, the main character is a poet, and this is during the Bolshevik Revolution of Russia. Early 1900s, and they thought that he was being petty and bourgeois by like living in the countryside and writing poetry, and they were just like, the private life is dead, we all have to give in, comrade, and do these things together, because it's a communist revolution. Mm-hmm. And so they attacked him for this, that's the character, This is kind of a fictional story that Boris Pasternak wrote, but it was based on some experiences, from what I understand. And so I always think of that, but the thing is, they're like, oh, you're going to go to the countryside? What are you going to do up there? And his answer, Yuri Andreevich Zhivago is the main character. He goes, just live. He's going to love. He's going to write poetry. He's going to be there. And he's a doctor too. He could work as a doctor. He worked at a hospital and everything like that. But it was so crazy. He left with his family and he just lived. And what about living? What's the quality of our life? We may be doing all these kinds of things, but are we spending the being time? Are we paying attention to the quality of that time? Are we kind to people? Are we kind to ourselves? I think that if you spend time with that, it's not selfish. It's unselfish. I find that I'm more available if I really take the time to take care of this right here, and let myself be still, and provide a life for myself, or create a life for myself. You gotta get creative, as we were talking earlier, how this is Buddhism and contemplative practices is very much like it's like a minority spirituality situation. A lot of people they may not get it. And that's okay. I've gotten comfortable with that too. So I get to have interesting conversations with folks.
Is there some major event maybe? The question is what led you to a monastic life, but a contemplative life.
Contemplative.
And you said it was a young person you already had like thought?
Right. I was called to it, but really like
Was there some kind of?
there are a few things. Like I went to community college and just kind of paid my way through. This was still like the 90s and the late 90s, so it was more possible to do that than now. Cost of living hadn't risen so much yet. And I took every class that I could and learned everything. I was just taking generals and basics, but I took humanities, philosophy quite a bit, very heavily, and art courses. And everything really, sociology, psychology. And I was always curious, loved psychology and loved philosophy. The philosophy course that I took had Eastern and Western philosophy. I really lucked out. And then the comparative religion course and things like that. And some independent studies to follow that up. And while I was going through all of that, I just found that my assumptions about the tradition I grew up in, Christianity, and other traditions, a lot of it was wrong. You know, when I really looked at what those traditions were, and it shook me up, you know, and it rearranged me somehow. I didn't know what the rearrangement was going to be, but when I was looking through the traditions and really spending time with them and going through the readers and doing a lot of reading outside of class, you know, I just park myself in the library and check things out, or the bookstores. And Buddhism and Taoism and Vedanta Hinduism were the things that really stood out to me. I liked it. I liked the description of non-duality in Vedanta and also in Buddhism. It made sense to me. The working with suffering, working with your life as it is, and you know, the Four Noble Truths and the other original discourses of the Buddha. The description of Zen, which was kind of poetic and puzzling at the time. It still is, actually, but that's what I like about it. Tibetan Buddhism, that it wasn't really one thing, but it was that kind of tipped the scales, because what I grew up with watching, like Karate Kid, and I was like, I thought it was really cool that Mr. Miyagi meditated, you know, and I was always like, I want to check that out sometime. What's the mind, you know, like I want to check it out. That's why I love psychology. But there's actually one event that really hit me, and it just kind of a martial arts interest overall too. And I did practice Qigong while I was in college, and there was a friend of mine that I met who was into all of this. He kind of helped open the door. So it's kind of the right people, the right classes, and me, who was receptive at that time. But what really helped open the door to all this too at a younger age, when I was about 16 or 17, I was praying for some people that I worked with. I worked in fast food at the time. You know, I was in high school. It was a great first job, and they were challenging people. You know, they had some really hard things in their life, and they'd been through a lot, and they weren't easy to work with. And so I included them in prayer in the way that I was taught. I grew up Catholic, like I may have mentioned, and I was just like, you know, said a rosary, dedicated to them, and then just prayed and kept praying, and something really opened, and I don't really know what it was, but I was flooded with it was almost like a feeling of ecstasy and compassion for these people, with all of that, just being there, being with how it affected me, with how much pain they were going through. And there was just like this empathy kind of like just overwhelmed me, and there were tears and everything. You know, it's funny, I knew at that time that like being loving was one of the most important things, if not the most important thing, in being a human being, and being kind, and I knew that I had to live some kind of spiritual life for others, you know, kind of like that Mahayana view of, you know, living for others in that regard, living at the service of other people's awakening or other people's growth. And so there's that calling. It's what's really kind of taken hold and brought me into what I'm doing now. And because Buddhism is still in its infancy here in the West, you know, we just we create these little subcultures to keep it alive. Countercultures, you might say. It's kind of fun. It's like the Wild West. You just don't show up and have 3 square meals a day provided for you and everything, like if you're a monastic in another tradition, or if you're in Asia or something. Yeah.
Okay, that's
good.
Great.
Good. Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm really very glad you showed up and that we were able to do this.
Yeah, thank you
so much.
That was wonderful.
Yeah.